In 2017, a team of geneticists did something that had failed repeatedly for decades. They pulled real, usable DNA out of Egyptian mummies. Hot, dry desert climates are usually terrible for preserving genetic material. Heat breaks it down fast. For years, most scientists assumed reliable ancient Egyptian DNA was basically off the table. Then a team from the University of Tübingen and the Max Planck Institute proved that assumption wrong, and in doing so, they reopened one of the most argued about questions in ancient history. Who were the ancient Egyptians, genetically, and how closely are modern Egyptians actually related to them? The study focused on one specific site, Abusir el-Meleq, a settlement and necropolis in Middle Egypt, about 70 miles south of Cairo. Researchers worked with 151 mummified individuals recovered from that site, spanning roughly 1,300 years from the late New Kingdom, around 1400 BCE, through the Ptolemaic period, and into the Roman era, up to around 400 CE. That's a long window. It covers Alexander the Great's conquest, the entire Greek-ruled Ptolemaic dynasty, Cleopatra's dynasty, and part of Roman occupation. Out of those 151 individuals, the team successfully extracted usable mitochondrial DNA from 90 of them. Mitochondrial DNA only tells part of the story. It's passed down exclusively through the maternal line, so it traces one ancestral thread, not the whole picture. But from 3 of those individuals, the researchers went further and recovered full genome-wide nuclear data genetic material from both parents, the much more complete kind of dataset. That's a small number, 3 people. It's worth sitting with that number for a second, because a lot of what gets said about this study online skips right past it. Here's what they found. Genetically, the ancient inhabitants of Abusir el-Meleq were most closely related to ancient populations from the Near East, the Levant, Anatolia, and parts of the Eastern Mediterranean. Not to sub-Saharan African populations, and not, at least according to this dataset, dramatically different from their Near Eastern neighbors across the region and across the 13 centuries the study covered. Wolfgang Hack, one of the researchers, noted something specific. This population's genetic makeup didn't undergo any major shift during that entire 1,300-year span, even through Alexander's conquest, even through Ptolemaic and Roman rule. A lot of people had assumed those foreign invasions and administrations flooded the local gene pool with new ancestry. The data said otherwise. The population stayed remarkably continuous. Then the study did something that made it a lot more interesting and a lot more talked about. It compared those ancient genomes to 135 modern Egyptian samples from the same general region, and it found a real, measurable difference. Modern Egyptians, on average, carry meaningfully more sub-Saharan African ancestry than the ancient individuals from Abusir el-Meleq did. Researchers estimated the gap at somewhere around 8% more at the nuclear genome level. The interpretation the researchers offered wasn't mysterious. It lines up with known history. Increased mobility along the Nile over the last roughly 2,000 years, tied to factors like the trans-Saharan slave trade and later Islamic-era expansion, gradually shifted the region's genetic makeup more than many people had assumed. Johannes Krause, one of the lead researchers, was fairly direct about it. The popular assumption had been that foreign conquest made Egyptians more Eurasian over time. What the data actually showed was closer to the opposite. Modern Egyptians are, genetically, somewhat more connected to sub-Saharan Africa than their ancient predecessors at this specific site were. That's the headline result, and it genuinely surprised a lot of people, because it cuts directly against decades of assumptions that had been circulating in different directions from different corners of the internet for different reasons, none of which were built on actual ancient DNA before this study existed. Now, the caveats matter here more than in almost any topic like this, and good researchers involved in the study said so themselves repeatedly in the original paper. First, this is one site, Abusir el-Meleq in Middle Egypt. Ancient Egypt stretched roughly 750 miles along the Nile, from the delta in the north down through Upper Egypt and toward Nubia in the south, a huge span of geography, with real regional variation in population and culture across that distance, documented across thousands of years of dynastic history. This study cannot speak for that entire span. It speaks for one community, in one region, across one 1,300-year window. Whether the population of, say, Thebes, or the pyramid-building era of the Old Kingdom 1,000+ years earlier, or the far south near the Nubian border, match this specific genetic profile is a separate question this dataset simply wasn't built to answer. Second, the full genome-wide sample was 3 people. 3. The mitochondrial sample of 90 tells you something, but only about maternal lineage, which is one thread out of many. Serious ancient DNA researchers, including some connected to this exact project, have been upfront that this is an early foundational study, genuinely important as a proof of concept that reliable Egyptian mummy DNA could be recovered at all, but not a large enough sample on its own to make sweeping, settled claims about the ancestry of an entire ancient civilization spanning 3,000 years of history. Third, and this is the part that gets lost the most in how this study circulates online, this research wasn't designed to answer, and doesn't answer, the broader, older, more loaded question that a lot of people bring to it, the long-running public argument over whether ancient Egyptians should be understood primarily as an African civilization, a Middle Eastern one, a Mediterranean one, or something that doesn't map cleanly onto any modern category at all. That debate has been running in academic and popular circles for well over a century, tangled up with colonial-era scholarship, 20th century Afrocentrist scholarship responding to it, and a lot of politically motivated arguments on multiple sides that predate any of this genetic data by decades. This one study, from one site, with 3 full genomes, didn't settle that. It added one specific, useful, genuinely new data point to a much older and much larger conversation, and like most single studies in complicated fields, it's most accurate to treat it as a piece of evidence, not a final verdict. What can be said with real confidence based specifically on what this study actually measured? The community at Abusir el-Meleq, across the New Kingdom through Roman periods, showed strong, consistent genetic ties to Near Eastern populations, more than to sub-Saharan African ones, at that site, in that era, and modern Egyptian populations, at least based on the 135 samples compared here, carry more sub-Saharan ancestry than that ancient community did a shift researchers link to roughly 2,000 years of migration and mobility along the Nile and across the Sahara, well after the era of the pharaohs the popular imagination usually pictures. It's a narrower finding than either side of the online argument tends to present it as. It's also a genuinely significant one, not because it ends a century-old debate, but because for the first time, actual ancient DNA, instead of assumption, iconography, or modern population sampling, got to weigh in on part of it directly. The team behind the study has been clear that this is a starting point, not an ending one. Wider sampling across more sites, more time periods, and more regions of ancient Egypt, including the south, including earlier dynastic periods, including royal lineages separately from ordinary communities like Abusir el-Meleq, would be needed to build a fuller genetic picture of a civilization that lasted roughly 3,000 years and covered a huge, genetically diverse stretch of the Nile. Until that broader work exists, what's actually proven is specific. One community, one region, one long but limited window of time, and one measurable shift between then and now. Ancient Egypt was one of the most interconnected civilizations of the ancient world, trading and fighting and intermarrying across the Eastern Mediterranean, the Near East, and Africa for thousands of years. That's not really in dispute. What this study did was give researchers their first real genetic thread to start pulling on, instead of just guessing from statues, inscriptions, and modern assumptions layered on top of a civilization that ended long before anyone had the tools to actually ask its people directly in their own DNA where they came from.